be the next really commercially successful AM application? And do you think it will be an AM product or just a hidden component?
Well, I think in general, I think probably the biggest area for additive manufacturing in the future is probably going to be anything to do with medical, whether that's plastics or metals, because you tend to have the complexity there, and also cost can sometimes be less of an issue. I mean, certainly, if I think of the work that we've done at Additive Scientific, probably the biggest potential area was a medical application, and that was partly down to complexity, geometric complexity, just the capability of the process. But I think we're going to see additive manufacturing in pretty much every sector. There's the only sector I don't really see it taking much active part is actually in farming. Every other sector it will be there, even farm machinery or whatever. So it's just down to a timing issue and cost, really. So it's certain companies come to us and they've identified that they want to make something by additive manufacturing, usually because they can't do it by the existing processes, and that will just grow, and so it will become a more mainstream manufacturing process. Just like, if we think back 30-40 years ago with electrical discharge machining, when I did my degree, electrical discharge machining was called a non-conventional manufacturing process. Whereas, now you just think, well, it's just a normal manufacturing process. And additive manufacturing will become the same.
In my world of digital manufacturing, as we're now calling it, because it's broader than just additive, we've been involved in everything from inkjet technology to binder jet and laser systems. The whole concept of additive is it doesn't have to be a truly large-scale three-dimensional shape. And to give you an example, one of the projects we've been working on with some funding from the Faraday Challenge was using digital deposition techniques, which essentially are additive manufacturing processes, to make electrodes for batteries. And the reason we're doing that is because it gives us accurate control. So rather than an analog sort of broad brush process of applying coatings, we're able to control that coating, and essentially we're building up 3D layers, but they're very thin. So when you look at it, you think it's a 2D object, but they're not. It's a complex 3D object. And I think that's where some of the future of additive is how you hybridize some of the technologies and manufacturing processes that give you multi-material, multifunctional components. And the real benefit perhaps of additive, two benefits I think of additive generally are being able to make things that you couldn't make before, but also being able to make them at minimum order levels of one. That's the real advantage in the future. There's the mass customization thing, which from a medical point of view is really important, but that applies to many other sectors also. And going back to the environmental bit and the recycling point, it has a part to play in that also, because we can reduce the amount of stock that's held. We can reduce the amount of material that gets unnecessarily converted into end-use parts using energy that we didn't need to use. And we're only using the materials that we need to use and storing them in a generic form that allows us to make any part that we need out of them. So I think we've really got to understand why additive, or why digital, more importantly, and exploit that to its real benefits, rather than trying to just make another process that makes parts, as James said earlier, in a way that already works really well.
If I was going to answer the original question about whether it's a component or a 3D printed product, I'd go component. I don't really understand this drive to 3D print a whole thing. Like, there's so many 3D printed cars out there. If you 3D print a whole product like that, then it's just going to be ridiculously expensive. There is always a place for traditional manufacturing, So if you engineer a solution, it may well have components in it that are 3D printed, but it's not a 3D printed product.
So your 3D printed product could be a sensor, which is a multi-material, multi-level component that is not assembled but actually made in one go, using different materials and different processes. It doesn't have to be a car.
True. I just like to see. I see these some of these marketing stunts, and I find them quite funny.